and department in charge, Professor Manjari ma'am, to come up and join on us on the dais. Once again, very good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Dr. Akansha Trivedi, and on the behalf of Department of English and Spectrum Club, Vasanta College for Women, I welcome you all in today's inaugural session of the add-on course Gender Sensitization to the Human Understanding of LGBTQ Identities. We are gathered here not merely to start a course, but to start a conversation, one which society often postpones, institutions hesitate to formalize, and individuals struggle to articulate. Gender is not only a biological category, it is a social experience, cultural construction, and very personal journey. Sensitization, therefore, does not mean agreement, it means understanding. And understanding begins when we listen before we judge. Today's session marks the first step of agreement that will explore history, literature, life experiences, and social realities surrounding gender and sexuality. Any course on gender sensitization is not merely academic. It reflects the ethos of the institution hosting it. When students are encouraged to ask difficult questions and engage with unfamiliar perspectives, education becomes meaningful. We are fortunate to have an administration that encourages dialogues, reflection, and respectful engagement with social realities. With now, I invite our Honorable Principal, Professor Alka Singh Ma'am, to deliver the welcome address.
I think this event in the college is historical in its own perspective because amongst us we have a renowned speaker and a wonderful human being amongst us, Professor Ruth Vanita. And this is like a dream come true for her to be here in the college in front of you. She has addressed us online, but since a long time I had been trying to get you to the college, and it was by fluke that I saw a message of hers where she had come to her college or university in Assam, and that she would be staying in India during this time. And today's word is all about capturing information, translating it into a living reality. And this is what has happened. The minute I saw that, I got in touch with Rachna, the young colleague in my department, and told her, no, she has to come to our college. And I feel so privileged having you here, along with the entire Department of English, which has made this happen, with all my colleagues of the Vasanta College for Women, my students before you, and Vishmurthy Foundation at large. A warm welcome to you. This we have been carrying on for now a few years, the add-on course, and it is basically through the Spectrum Club of the college in association with the Department of English, of course, but it started with a mission to inculcate human understanding amongst ourselves. We are so living in a world which is so very conditioned around us, and that conditioning penetrates our mind, and we are living in some kind of watertight compartments in our real lives without trying to understand the other. And when I say the other, anyone other than our own selves, our own identity, our own religion, our own country, and so on and so forth. But we, being blessed in terms of being a superior mammal on the earth, we need to understand what it is that can encapsulate the entire slot of mankind that is on earth, with a diversity in concept, with a diversity in one's thought, and a diversity which is brought about by one's personal choice or in terms of the biological self also. And it is with this because Vasanta College for Women stands for a philosophy of a kind which brings it apart from the others, where we have consistently been talking about getting rid of our conditioning, the conditioning that is given to us from birth and then carries on through our education and today as you are sitting before us. We give you a freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of dialogue, which is the most essential concept of understanding each other, whether it be mankind, whether it be religion, whether it be spirituality, whatever it is. So on this note, I want to congratulate the Spectrum Club, along with the Department of English and the entire fraternity of the college, for having that vision of being so open to discussions, to dialogues that will enable us to be better human beings beyond the sex that one is endowed with. And on this note, I feel privileged to be heading a college and children like you who are open to discussions have had the vision of joining this add-on course, and I'm sure that the benefit you will draw out of it once it culminates in its validity, you will understand so many other aspects of life which will endear life to you. I wish you a very successful workshop which has been very seriously designed by the entire club under the leadership of Dr. Rachna Pandey and Dr. Manjeet Junjunwala, the heading the department, and Saurabh, who is a part of the entire organization, along with my other colleagues from the department. And we look forward to learning so many things, and it's a blessing in disguise that a connoisseur of such thoughts sits before us. I just cannot believe that she is here and she's going to address you children. It is a long cherished dream of mine which has been fulfilled through your need. So thank you for allowing me to have her here, and thank you ma'am for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your thoughtful words and encouraging academic spaces like this. We are honored. Now it's time to honor our honorable speaker, ma'am, and for that I will request honorable principal, ma'am, honorable Professor Manjuri, ma'am, and respected Professor Saurabh sir to move forward and kindly felicitate our speaker, ma'am. Students, give a huge round of applause. Thank you so much, everyone. Every meaningful academic initiative begins with a vision. The idea behind this course is not simply awareness but reflection. Reflection on how societies define normalcy and how individuals negotiate identity within those definitions. To present the concept note of this course, I invite Dr. Rashna Pandey ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of English and convener of Spectrum LGBTQIA Plus Club. Ma'am, please. Students give a huge round of applause to her.
Thank you, Dr. Akansha. Respected dignity, on the dais and off the dais, faculty members, students and participants, a very good afternoon and warm welcome to each one of you. So, on behalf of Department of English and Spectrum Club, I feel privileged to speak about the add-on course on gender sensitization towards a humane understanding of LGBTQ identities, as we welcome the third batch of this important initiative, which began 3 years back in the year 2023. As we all understand that the role of an educational institute is not only limited to achieve academic excellence, but to provide a right environment where social attitudes are shaped and values are integrated. Students who come from various backgrounds, trainings, and conditioning, they grow up many a times without a structured opportunities to learn about gender diversity and in a thoughtful manner, to learn about gender diversity in a thoughtful manner and a respectful manner. So as a result, there is a strange discomfort, phobia, and prejudices which we need to replace through empathy, love, and respect through this course. So this add-on course seeks to bridge that gap, and the objective of this add-on course is not merely to provide information, but to cultivate a humane understanding, where we aim to create a safe space for dialogue, and also where they can think, speak, reflect, and also unlearn their biases. So we prepare students for the real world, which is diverse without any question. The world is diverse. As we begin the third batch, we also celebrate the continuity of this course, which is a success. The positive response to the previous two batches, in which 180 participants were trained and benefited, they reflected and they understood, which created this course created a kind of awareness that education is not only limited to the textbooks and examination, it must really shape the compassionate citizen as well. So in this course, we have 15 sessions, which are primarily divided into two segments. One is the sensitization through talk and dialogue, and the other segment is sensitization through cinema. So I encourage all the participants and attendees to approach this course with an open and curious mind and also with respect. So let it help us to deepen our sense of humanity, our spirit to believe in inclusive world and empathy to live in a better world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You have clearly laid down the intellectual framework behind our course, which reminds us that education is not only about information, but it is also about empathy. We now move towards the most awaited part of today's session. It is a privilege to host a scholar whose work has significantly contributed to the study of gender and sexuality in the Indian context. Our speaker, Professor Ruth Vanita ma'am. Ma'am is a distinguished writer, translator, and a literary scholar whose work has significantly shaped discussions on gender and sexuality in the Indian context. She is the author of several influential books, including Love's Right, Same-Sex Marriages in Modern India, The Dharma of Justice in Sanskrit Epics, and Gender, Sex in the City. Her most recent publication includes the novel A Slight Angle, 2024, and the critical study Shakespeare's Revisions of History, just published last year, 2025. Professor Vanita has published numerous essays and translations across Hindi and English and has also co-edited the pioneering volume of Same-Sex Love in India. She taught for many years at Delhi University and later on at the University of Montana. She was also a co-founder of Manushi, one of the India's earliest nationwide feminist journals. Her research bridges literature, history, and living social realities experiences, making her work especially important for understanding gender and identity in South Asian society. We are truly honored to have her with us today. Ma'am, now I invite you to deliver the inaugural address for this session. The stage is all yours, ma'am. Students, give a huge round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Principal, and for your kindness, and thank you to the English Department, and to Dr. Rachna Pandey and Dr. Tuba Masood, who took me around, etc. And very nice to be here. So I'm going to talk today not about identities. I just want to make it clear, and I'm not talking about identities. My work is not on identities. My work is on relationships only, same-sex relationships. In these categories which I don't think there's a difference between a category and an identity. Okay. So in the Kama Sutra, for example, this is a 4th century book, there are categories. There are men who desire, it says there are 2 types of men. There are men who desire men and men who desire women. There are 2 types. So it gives the categories. But that is different from identity. Identity, sexual identities are not part of Indian history and literature. What does an identity mean when you say, I am a Bengali, let's say, or you say, I am gay? That doesn't exist in that form, and for sexuality, I mean. And these are all words invented in the West, in the modern West, which have come to India, which is fine. But these are not words, even today, used by low-income people. They talk about their relationships, but they don't use these words till somebody gives them the word in English. These are not identities, are not, these are Western imports. For instance, it's said that my work is LGBTQ No, it's not. It's not possible to be all those things together. And my work is, I'm not looking at identities, I'm looking only at relationships. And in Indian literature, sexuality has been strange about same-sex love. It has been there in all cultures from ancient times. So there's nothing strange about it. Okay, moving on, moving. Give me a laptop, I can do it with the others.
Actually, it is connected here with the
Okay,
all the setup.
When move on to the next one, I'll have to tell you. I can move to the next slide. Okay. And I want to also say that in Indian thought, ultimately, and I think in most of the world's thought, no one can be boxed up in a category or an identity. That is, you may see yourself as gay, but that's not all you are. You may be Bengali, but that is not all you are. You may be a vegetarian, that is not all you are. So these are all identities which are contained in you, but you are bigger than those identities. And I have been studying this work recently, and that's Harmona Charthona Kamona Mokshaha Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham, which means I am not, these are the 4 aims of life. I am not dharma or artha or kama or moksha. What is kama? Kama is desire. So yes, kama is part of life, but I am not kama. You can't define a person just by their desire or their sexuality or their wealth. Artha means money. You can't define them by that. They are more than that. Ultimately, they are the form of consciousness and bliss. Everyone is that. So yes. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little history based on this book to begin with. Move on. So this book was published in the year 2000. Okay, and in this book, what we did was, my co-author and I, co-editor and I, we didn't know anything about this subject. So we started by reading. I read very widely in Sanskrit, and the language is descended from Sanskrit, and he read in Urdu and Persian, etc. And when we found those works which were produced in India, we translated bits of those original works into English. That's what the book consists of, 15 Indian languages. Now, just to give you a little bit of history, so we found, see, I didn't know anything at the time on the subject, so I educated myself. It was an education for me, and for both of us actually. And we found that in India, this is different from the West. In the West, people who we would call gay, men who were attracted to women, were executed for it. Okay, they were burnt alive for years and years and years. They were imprisoned, they were tortured, etc. And that is why the British brought their law, anti-sodomy law, section 377, into India. It was the first time in India. They introduced it here in 1861. तभी से सारी प्रॉब्लम शुरू हो गई. उससे पहले इंडिया में कभी किसी nobody was executed. This topic was discussed. People had different opinions. Some had a mild disapproval. Some had it was fine with it. Some were celebrating. Different things were happening. And in all regions, nobody was trying to stamp it out. People were openly writing about it. Whereas in Europe, it was considered such a bad thing that it was not even to be mentioned. It was called the unspeakable. You can't speak about it. So India में कभी ऐसे नहीं था. This law remained in India from 1861. The law is the British law up to 2018. So more than about 150 years. Yeah. So in India, I'm just going to give you a very quick summary. In the Kama Sutra, it's a sacred text, it's a Shastra, it's about Kama, which is one of the aims of life, like the Artha Shastra is about Artha, wealth, which is another aim of life. And it gives you, Kama Sutra says that there are 64 types of pleasurable activities, which includes flower arrangement. So Kama doesn't mean just sexual desire, it means all desires. And Vatsyayana, the author says, every educated person should know all these 64 arts. I think it will tell your whole life. Yes, you should know perfumes, you should know flower arrangement, you should know cookery. Everybody, men, women, everybody should know all these 64 arts. And then it also talks about sexual desire. And it says everyone should read this. Young girls should also read this. Everyone should read this Kama Sutra. Yeah, and it has one chapter on men who desire men, and it says, yes, there are two types of men. One kind of man, the subcategory, the one who desire men, there are two types. Masculine looking ones who have beard and mustache, and feminine looking ones who look more like girls. Yeah, and then it has a long description of oral sex between men, very open and explicit. And it also says that any two male friends who trust each other, they can enter into a union. Now, so it's complex and I have worked on this. And finally, Vatsyayana says, कि कुछ लोग इसको अच्छा नहीं मानते. So there are different opinions. In different regions, there are different opinions. So he gives the opinion. And he says, what finally his last sentence, which I love, is who does what, where and where, who knows? Which is very true. Because people cannot tell you what they are doing, right? So they just seem to be a man married to a woman. What they're actually doing, we don't know with themselves or with anybody. We don't know. You never know. So that's what he said. Okay, this is a more recent book of mine. It's about the justice of dharma in the Sanskrit epics on many topics. It's not primarily about sexuality at all. But I just want to mention that in the Mahabharata, Princess Shikhandini, her father brings her up as a boy, dresses her as a boy, and at a certain point, she magically changes into a boy. This is somewhat different from present-day transgender people who are called transgender, because once Shikhandini becomes a boy, she can produce children. It's not a she anymore. He can produce children. He is fully changed, and it's done not by surgery or hormones. It is done by miracle, right? But for me, the interesting point is that after he becomes a boy, he was married to a girl, dressed up as a boy. And once he becomes a boy, he remains married to that same lady. There is no second, they're not remarried again. Well, what does that mean? It means that the first marriage between the two women, when Shikhandini was a woman, that marriage is still considered valid. And I think that is a very interesting point which nobody has noticed. Okay, another book. This is an 11th century Sanskrit book, Katha Sagar. And in this book, I found two words, and I was the first to find this and to analyze it. One word is Swayamvara Sakhi. Now, we all know Swayamvara is where a girl chooses a bridegroom, right? But here the word is used in a different way. Swayamvara Sakhi is a woman's self-chosen friend. Literally, Swayam plus Vara. Vara means chosen, choice, okay? So a friend who you choose yourself, for a man is a Swayamvara Sakha, and for a girl is a Swayamvara Sakhi. And it tells stories of these two girls who fall in love at first sight. I don't have time to go into all the details. Now, how does it explain love? And this is not just for same-sex love, this is for any love where you unexpectedly fall in love with someone at first sight. Like, even though it is socially disapproved, आप family को पसंद नहीं है, को पसंद नहीं है, कोई भी हो सकता है, जिससे आप प्यार में पड़ जाते हैं, क्यों पड़ जाते हैं? इसलिए, and this is the description, the famous sentence, Bhakti Janamantara Pritim Manata Smiha Vikaranam. This Akaranam, this love that comes to your heart with no reason, like no one can explain why you feel this love. This shows that it is coming from a form of birth. And this idea that love comes from a form of birth is a very Indic idea. You won't find it in England or France, right? So I think this is an absolutely central idea. The book I now have just written, it's not published yet, is on this idea of rebirth and how it is so important to Indian thinking about all kinds of things, about change, about love, about hatred, about revenge, about so many things. This explanation is given in the literature for a lot of kinds of relationships which are disapproved, cross-class, across caste, across same-sex, all kinds of loves. And even today, the young couples, I'll come to this later, who get married or run away together, they often say that we cannot live without each other. And if you stop us in this birth, we will be together in the next birth. So rebirth is an explanation not only from a past birth, but also for a future birth. They also talked to some Hindu priests who had conducted some same-sex weddings. I'll come to that. And I asked them that why did you do it and what were you thinking? And they said if these two are so much determined to marry each other, in spite of the family's disapproval, the society's disapproval, it means that there is some connection from a previous birth which we cannot fight against that. If we stop it now, then it will come up in the next birth. You can't get rid of it, is what they say. I think that's a very interesting and unique Indic explanation. This I just wanted to show you. It's this absolutely stunning, larger than life-size sculpture, 11th century from Orissa, where the god Kamadeva, is shooting an arrow at two women. And it's you can't see very clearly, but all of them have this blissful smile on their face. Kama has this blissful smile, the two women also have this blissful smile. One more story which I was the first to kind of analyze and discover this story. There are several manuscripts of the Bengali Ramayana, which is called the Kritikas Ramayana, 14th century. In some of the manuscripts, this story is there. In some manuscripts, it is not there. But it's a very fascinating story where a king Dilipa dies and his two widows, Chandra and Mala. Now, if you are both married to the same man, once he dies, then what is your relationship to each other? So you have to keep on living together, and to keep on living together, that itself is a kind of marriage because you're going to spend your life together. They both, the text is very clear and very explicit, they both fall in love with each other, they both have a sexual relationship, and one of them becomes pregnant. And she can't understand like, how did I become pregnant? And the reason she became pregnant is that the gods had planned it and they had made her become pregnant. They come and explain to her. And really remarkable is also that the word bhaga in Sanskrit, bhaga, has about 100 meanings. In Sanskrit every word has 100 meanings. But one of those meanings is the vulva. And so the god comes and tells them, the poet who is writing the poem says that the boy is named Bhagiratha because he was born from the pleasure between two bhagas. He said, I'm telling you, this is the meaning. This may not actually be the meaning of Bhagiratha, but the poet says this is the meaning. So I found that interesting. So, okay, I won't go into all these details about the different manuscripts where the two women fall in love and the beautiful boy is born. And when the boy is born, you know who Bhagirath is. He's a famous hero who brings Gangaji down from heaven, right? So he's not an ordinary child. I'll give you a couple of examples from medieval North India. So there were these two 18th century poets, Maulvi Mukarram Baksh and Mukarram, and they lived together. When the older man died, the younger man observed Iddat, which is the widow's period of mourning for the husband. And then after observing that, he got all the property of this older guy who had died. There are other examples. There was a Sufi Sarmat, 16th, early 17th century. He fell in love with a Hindu young man and written poetry. And then Prince Dara Shikoh became the admirer of Sarmat, who was a Sufi. Aurangzeb executed both Sarmat and Dara Shikoh. But Sarmat is still buried in Jamjawan Masjid, and his tomb people go there. It's known as Hare Shah. Similarly, there's another Sufi Shah Hussain. He fell in love with a Hindu youth called Madhulan. Okay, and they were known as Madhu Hussain. Their names were joined. They were known as Madhu Hussain. And it's a very interesting story. He's threatened with execution and so on. And now they are buried together in Lahore. Now, of course, most people don't view it like this. I am telling you the story and giving you the interpretation that they were in love. That's how it's explained in the literature at that time. Nowadays, most people who worship at that shrine, Durga, they don't know this meaning, but they know that two are buried together, and they celebrate that cruise every year. Okay. Okay, this is a book I wrote on Urdu poetry, and I learned Urdu to write this, to read this poetry, which is very interesting. In the 18th, 17th, 18th century particularly, all the Urdu poets, everyone wrote about male-male love. It was absolutely a convention. Even you had to write about something about it. So, Mir Takimi, Ghalib, everyone wrote about it. So, female-female love was not written about. Male-male love was written about. This comes from Farsi, comes from Persia, this custom of writing. But what happens now then in Lucknow, particularly in Lucknow, but also a little bit in Hyderabad, is that some poets start writing about love between women. And that is really fascinating. They describe these unions between women, female unions. They have words for a female lover, woman's female lover, like Dogana, Zanaki. And they have a word for sexual love between women. They call it Chapti, Chipatna, not Chapti. And they have actually, several poets wrote a long poem about love between two women, and they called it Chapti Nama. And it became an actual genre of poetry to write a Chapti Nama. These are all men writing this poetry, Muslim men. So, my favorite poet, Inshallah Khan Insha. बन बैठे हैं दुल्हा दुल्हन इस वक्त जो हम तुम तो लाख रुपए का तो बंधे महल दो गाना. One woman says to the other, like you and I are sitting here just like a groom and bride. So look at the imagery of marriage, right? So we agree on a meher, a dower of 1,00,000 rupees. Another one by another Miswar, भी आतू जी हराम कहा अब भला रहा मैंने जो गाना में तो है मिलकर पढ़ा मुद्दा. Mutta is a kind of Shia marriage, contract marriage, temporary marriage, which can be renewed. It's a Shia marriage. He actually uses the word mutta to describe this union between two women. I'm just giving you a couple of examples in the book. I have translated a lot. And the poet Rangeen, Saadat Ya Khan Rangeen, so this is late 18th, early 19th century. He lived a long life. He describes in his prose work, he describes how the two women used to create a couple and create a marriage. Now these women, we don't know who these women were. They might have been wives, courtesans, or they might have been married women, married to a man. But among their female companions, they also have a kind of couple with another female friend. So he describes how they take an elaichi and they break it and they keep dividing the seeds, handling the seeds. And then they become a couple, they get married. He uses the word shadi. Among their female companions, यानी अपनी सहेलियों के बीच वो उनको शादीशुदा समझा जाता है, and the name given to them is Elaichi, because he describes various such rituals by which women form couples. This is only one of the rituals. Yeah. Okay, I won't read this one, but I'll read this. It's one of my favorite. आप एक नैन तेरा जनाती मेरी जान ले गई, हक तो जुनून तो देखिए और शान ले गई, हर आन जी पे आन भरी उसके उनसे, हर आन उसके दिल मेरा हर आन ले गई. So one woman is speaking about another woman and saying how she absolutely enraptured her. There's a lot of wordplay there, which I explain in the book. I don't have time to go into it. But she's talking about how she's absolutely enraptured with this other girl. Yeah. This is a nice, cute little one by this book. Zanaki is a name for a woman's girlfriend. Zanaki क्या ही मजे से ये कल गुजारेगा, बलाए हाथों ने मेरे जो ली तुम्हारी रात. So you understand? बलाए हाथों, you know, बलाए, take somebody's from a certain side. बलाए हाथों ने मेरे जो ली तुम्हारी रात, बलाए हाथों की लेती रही मैं सारी रात. So it's this very clever description of sex between two women without explicitly saying so. But hathon, my hands took your balai, and then the whole night I kept feeling so happy with my hands for having done that. So just so clever, yeah. So then I wrote this academic book about this, but then I wrote this novel about this called Memory of Light, when Penguin published it in 2021. And I have a description in it. Many things happen in the novel, but I have two women being in love, and then I also have a description of two women getting married, but that's Elijah ritual. So in this novel, it tells the story of love between two Tawairs, Nafis and Chapla, who is from Lucknow. Nafis is from Lucknow, Chapla is from Banaras, so your city. And it depicts their friends, family, neighbors, etc. And I have read a lot about these poets who wrote these poems in Shangi, etc. So I felt this I knew them, and I made them minor characters in the novel. They appear in the novel. I translated that novel into Hindi with a different title, Pariyon Ke Beach. Rajkumar published it. I wanted in English to call it Among Fairies. That was my original title, Among Fairies. But Penguin said that no, Among Fairies in English, fairies sounds like a children's story. हिंदी में परियों का परी का मतलब सुंदर व्यक्ति वो चल सकता है, इंग्लिश में फेरी तो बच्चों की कहानी लगती है. So I had to change. I put it in Hindi. I kept it परियों में. Okay, this is a book which contains translations of 16 Hindi stories written over a period of 100 years, from the 1920s to the 2020s. And there are some very interesting, so some famous writers, some unknown writers. Here's an example. Now today I'm talking about unions, about relationships that are like marriage, unions. So here's an example, this story, Gauri Jun by Vijay Ram. In fact, there are two women, Bija and Pija. I won't go into the details of the story, but Bija is raised as a boy, so it's very similar to the Shikhandin story from Mahabharata. Bija is raised as a boy, and her father marries her off to a girl. And when they discover that they are both girls, then they fall in love. And Bija says, marriage is a union of two hearts. If the hearts of two women unite, why shouldn't they get married? So this is saying the same thing which many other people, ordinary people in everyday life have said. I'll come to that. Another novel I discovered, it was very hard to find this novel, but I found it. It was written in 1947 by a Bihari writer called Asha Sahai. I've never heard of her, nobody had ever heard of her. And it's called Ekakini, which is a lovely word. Madhuri Ramon uses this word, Ekakini. And in that, there is a girl who is an artist, who is, says to her best friend is Alpi is going to get married to a man, and she says, no, don't marry a man. I consider this kind of the first marriage proposal in Hindi literature between two women. She says, you want a male life partner, you want a Sangi, Alpi. You don't want a female partner, Sangini. But will he love you more than I do? A woman is crying out for a woman. Don't ignore this longing cry, Alpi. Be my Alpi, I will be your Kala. So it's kind of quite clear what she is proposing, right? Okay, now I come to another interesting phenomenon, which is from 1980. 1980 is the first newspaper report I saw. There are a lot of young women all over the country, very young, that is around 18, 20, that age, young women, all of them are non-English speaking. This is the most important point. Non-English speaking, they didn't use any identity word like gay or lesbian, they didn't even know any such words, who got married to each other by Hindu ceremonies, or if they were stopped from getting married, they committed joint suicide. And you must have read about some of them. So I had collected about more than 200 such cases from 1980 onwards, and I wrote this next book about this. So the first such marriage was reported in the newspapers. हो सकता है उससे पहले भी शादियां रही हों, लेकिन ये पहला वाला है जो अखबारों में आया था. In this, there were these two girls. These are the two girls, Neela Namgyo and Urmila Srivastava. So it's a cross-caste marriage. They got married in a temple in 1987. Now I just want you to note the date, 1987. इस वक्त कहीं भी किसी भी देश में same sex marriage असंभव था, कानूनी नहीं था. There were no marriages anywhere in the world, and there was no movement for marriage in India. There was no gay movement only in India. So this idea of getting married was just their own idea. They loved each other and they wanted to get married. It didn't come from any movement. It didn't come from reading about anything. It was their own idea. They were both policewomen, constables, and they got married in a temple and made headlines in India. Headlines in all the newspapers. So one of the journalists went to their village. They were living together in Urmila's family home. She went there and she interviewed all the people around. And interestingly, their neighbor, who was a village school teacher, married to a man, her name was Sushila Pavasar. So village school teacher means itni zyada padhi likhi thi. And she gave this wonderful statement. She said, what is marriage? It's a wedding of two souls. Okay, so in Hinduism, marriage is not just a contract. Marriage is a sanskara. You know that, right? So marriage is a sanskara. It's a wedding of two souls. And she said, why does it have to be between a man and a woman? Now, what is interesting is this not very educated woman said this. Later, in 2002, there is a Shaiva priest who conducted a marriage of two Tamil women. I was at this marriage, Mala Nagarajan and Vega Subramanian. So he conducted the full Hindu ceremony and everything. So then I interviewed him and I asked him, like, आपने क्या सोच के ये किया? And he said कि मुझे मालूम था जब मुझसे कहा था, मैंने कभी सोचा नहीं था इसके बारे में. But मुझे मालूम था कि काफी मेरी आलोचना होगी अगर ये शादी कराऊंगा. But I thought about it, and he said the same thing, that in Hindu thought, the spirit, Atman, has no gender. Atman is not male or female. So if they both are attracted, they want to get married, then it's a wedding of spirits. So I can do it. So he did it. So this is the book I wrote about these marriages. It's called Love's Right. That title comes from a Shakespeare sonnet, where Shakespeare is talking about his love for a young man. And he calls it the perfect ceremony of love's right. And in that, so this book has been printed more than once. And it's about these marriages, but it's also about the background. Because what I found very interesting is that all these young women who got married, some of them, the families were opposing it. Others, the family started off by opposing it, but then when they saw the girls are very determined, they agreed. And they actually helped to make the arrangements to get them married, which I thought was very interesting. Like, where are these families, all non-English speaking, non-educated families? How are they doing? Where did this come from? Then you also have the couples who are committing suicide. Male-female couples do commit suicide and they are prevented from getting married. But female-female couples, एक तो male-male भी थे, पर ज़्यादातर female-female, जो जॉइंट सुसाइड करती थी और सुसाइड नोट्स में लिखती थी कि हमें इस जन्म में तो साथ रहने नहीं दिया और अगले जन्म में रहेंगे साथ. तो आई थॉट दिस आइडिया कि या तो शादी करनी है या मरना है. एक तो हिंदी सिनेमा जैसे है, either marriage or death, there's nothing in between. But where does it come from? And I looked at ancient scriptures, which I have given you with a little description, to show that the idea comes, it's part of Indian culture. It's not, that is why the families could understand it. So these girls went to their families, they didn't say, I am lesbian or anything, nobody would understand that. They said, this is the girl I want to marry, and everybody understands that. Now, if you just say, she's my best friend, then the parents will say, okay, she's your best friend, so you marry a man and you keep her as a friend. So when you say, I want to marry her, then they understand what you mean. So marriage is the Indian language of same-sex sexuality. It's not about saying I am a lesbian, nobody will understand that and they won't take it seriously also. They think you are a beauty, you are a lesbian, you change it. But when they see an actual person whom you want to marry, a real person, then they take it more seriously. Okay, so in this book, Love Right, I look at two things. One is that all these girls all over the country, and it's really from all over the country, low income, non-English speaking girls, they included Dalits, tribals, Hindus, couple of Muslims, Christians, fisherwomen, factory workers, domestic laborers, agricultural laborers, whole range of women, and who got married or committed joint suicide. And like I said, they didn't know any identity term. And then I also looked here at ancient and medieval Indian literature, which refers to same-sex marriages, like I gave you the Urdu examples, which refers to actual same marriages between women. Here's an example. I don't know if we can connect to the YouTube video, but now that we have YouTube, you can actually hear the voices of some of these women. So these two girls, Nikita and Abhilasha, in a village, Hamirpur in UP, they went to the registrar's office to get married, and the registrar said, "नहीं हम नहीं कर सकते ये शादी." So इन्होंने जयमाला पढ़ाया एक दूसरे को, and they asked the government that please recognize our marriage and please get us the same rights as other citizens. They're totally Hindi-speaking girls, village girls. And there are several videos where they have been interviewed. Yeah, you can take a photograph and you can listen to the video. I found a very moving video. I found it, and there's more than one. If you do Deekshika and Abhilasha, lesbian marriage, you'll find more than one video where they're talking. This is another, I think, very moving one. These are two tribal women. You can see from their faces कि English या कोई movement या कोई day वगैरह कुछ भी नहीं है. मतलब कि बिल्कुल आदिवासी लड़कियां हैं जो उड़ीसा, कान्हा ट्राइबल से उड़ीसा. The family, the village, all opposed it, but then after some time they were so determined that the priest agreed and they got them married. And the explanation was they love each other very much, so he decided to forgive them, the chief said. They had both been married, but they left it and they work as day laborers. They want to adopt the son, one of the nephews, the brother's son. So just look at their faces. These are such poor, low-income girls. What I'm trying to tell you is that this idea of same-sex marriage doesn't come from the West. It comes, these are the real pioneers of same-sex marriage, not the rich people who you read about आजकल जो शादियां हो रही हैं वो बहुत अच्छा हो रही हैं वही आती हैं बारे में. These are the real pioneers and the real martyrs of the movement to same-sex marriage. They did it before any of the rich people did it. Yeah. These two girls got married in 2001, Jaya and Tanuja. So this is a sort of a little more middle class, they were nurses. And they got married. The interesting thing is the family participated. 200 guests were there. And Jaya's sister married a man at the same time. So this is also very interesting. The priest performed a double marriage. You know how parents to save money, they have both the marriages at the same time. So one daughter is marrying a man, one daughter is marrying a woman in the same ceremony. So clearly the priest is giving it the same status, right? अब ये सब ठीक है कि सेरेमनी तो हो गई, लेकिन अगले दिन उनके मकान मालिक ने पढ़ा इखलार गए उन्होंने कहा तुम निकल जाओ घर से. So what I'm trying to say is if you don't have the legal rights, then you may get married, but you won't have any legal protection. Your employer, your landlord, and all can throw you out, right? So that is a problem. That's why we need legal rights. Another, they got married at this temple, Mahamaya Goddess Temple. It's one of the 52 Shakti peaks. And it's now in Chhattisgarh. I found that several of these girls got married in Devi Mandirs, specifically Shakti peaks. This is another example. These tribal villagers, Kingling and Royanati Basumatari, belonging to the same tribe, so Basumatari is the name of both of them, got married in 1999 at this Mahamaya temple. One is a field laborer, the other is a domestic. A very interesting case where in their village, they were beaten up, they were thrown out. They went from village to village, there was nowhere they could live. Finally, they found a village that accepted them. They lived there, they've been living there for many years. और फिर जब MLA की इलेक्शन हुआ, कैंडिडेट्स आए, तो गांव वालों ने कहा उनसे कि इन दोनों को legal rights दिलवाओ. This is the first example I found that ordinary villagers are asking for legal rights much before any gay movement was doing that. The villagers are thinking of it. This is from your own city, Varanasi. In 2019, see how young these girls are, very, very young teenagers. They got married at a temple here in Varanasi. based on this photograph, I got the cover made of the new edition of the book. The first attempt, priest said कि नहीं हम नहीं करेंगे. Then वो धंधा पे बैठ के बंदे थे दोनों और priest थे पंडित ने करवा दिया शादी. And they went to the police, and the police told the families कि इनको सताना नहीं है. So I don't know what happened. Okay, so to give you an example of suicide, so in 2018 in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, these two women, they're factory workers, Bhavna Thakur and Asha Thakur. They were both married to men. They didn't want to be with the men. They wanted to be with each other. There was a lot of problems with the families and so on. So they jumped into the Sabarmati River and they left this is the suicide note written in lipstick on a paper plate, in which they say, "We have left this world to live with each other. The world did not allow us to stay together, so perhaps in the next birth we will meet again." Many of the suicide notes say this. Okay. So today in the newspapers you would read about many celebrity weddings, same-sex weddings, and as I said, that's very good. But as I also said, the real pioneers are these girls who have been getting married since the 80s. And there are a few men also. There were these two men, a farmer and a hairdresser, barber, in a Bengali village quite some time ago, who families were harassing them and so on. They both swallowed poison together. So that is one example. There's a few examples like that. So yeah, I just wanted to point out that these marriages in India from the 1980s and 1990s are the first that I know of, much before it was legal anywhere in the world. The first country to make it legal was Netherlands. That was 2001. But ये शादियाँ तो 80s, 90s में हो रही थी. Okay, so now as you know, a case was filed in the Supreme Court to ask for the legal rights for same-sex marriages. This is one of the couples who filed the case, Kavita and Ankita. They live in Delhi and they filed a petition in the Delhi High Court saying that they should have the right to marry and get the legal rights under the Special Marriage Act. So these are some of the people who asked for this, the petitioners. And what I found very interesting is, now these legal cases everywhere in the world, these couples have filed these cases asking for the right to marry. And in the West, in Western countries, they've got the rights in most places. What I found unique about India was that in the West, most of the people who filed the cases are left-wing people. Here, everyone from extreme just right-wing to extreme right-wing, everything in between, all joined in this petition. I found it very interesting because what you learn about a civilization is not so much from the disagreements, it's the similarities which are important. That all these people with political totally different views could all agree on this tells you something about Indian civilization. Yeah, and but in 2023 Supreme Court ने मना कर दिया कि नहीं हम नहीं कर सकते पार्लियामेंट टोटल में उन्होंने मना कर दिया so अभी राइट्स नहीं है अब हम कह सकते हैं कि क्या फर्क पड़ता है if you can get married by an ceremony which people are doing then why do you need the legal rights or the legal recognition. So now I'm just giving you some examples of why we need the legal rights. What happens if you are living with somebody, and I know an actual case in Delhi, you are living with a partner and she dies. She suddenly dies. Now her family came, from Lucknow the family came and just took everything, took the girl also, she hadn't died yet, she was seriously ill. They took her and they took all her property and everything and went and they just treated the other girl as a roommate. तुम कौन हो? तुमको roommate हो, और तुम्हें ध्यान रखना चाहिए था, तुम्हें ध्यान नहीं रखा, and the partner who's living with her has no right, no say in her illness, in her hospitalization, after her death, in the funeral, nothing. So that's what happens if you have no status, if you have no legal status. Second example, there are many such rights, but one of the rights is this. If today an Indian man marries a foreign woman, let's say Australian woman, okay, now the very next day after the marriage, that Australian woman gets the right to get what is called an overseas citizenship of India, OCI. वो क्या होता है कि आप इंडिया में रह सकते हैं क्योंकि आपका हस्बैंड जो है वो नागरिक है, तो आप इंडिया में रह सकते हैं और आप काम भी कर सकते हैं, सिर्फ वोट नहीं दे सकते लेकिन बाकी सब कुछ कर सकते हैं, बैंक अकाउंट खोल सकते हैं, सब कुछ अपने नाम में, right? So immediately you get it. Whereas two women could have been married, legally married in Australia and living together for 25 years, they have no rights. When that Australian girl comes to India, woman comes to India, She has zero rights. She just has to come on a tourist visa. She can't stay on. She can't get a job. She can't open a bank account. And if anything happens and she partners in hospital, she has no rights over that also. She's a legal alien, right? So I'll give you an example of how this works. Okay, this is a male couple, Aditya Bani and Michael Char. This is one of the early cases of an upper class wedding. They got married in 1993 in Delhi. I know them. I know this couple, and so they are very rich. They have a lot of status, a lot of connections. Everything. This is the wedding. It was performed by Swami Bodhananda, and his mother was present. Aditya's mother, brother, the whole family was present. Okay, like Dharma and Vishal. And I interviewed the Swamiji who did the wedding, and he said, it's a long interview, but one of the things he says is that he thought, like, here are two people, they want to live together. So it has to have the blessings of God, the blessings of parents, and the blessings of elders. And he chanted a mantra from the Upanishads for their prosperity and their love. This is them. Now they were living in America, they came back to India to have these two children. And here they are with the twins, with the girl and boy. Here they are now, in 2020. They're still living in Delhi, children are grown up. But what happened? During COVID, in COVID, because Michael, who's an American, is on a tourist visa. Tourist visa का मतलब क्या है? हर 6 महीने बाद आपको देश से निकल के जाना पड़ेगा. अगर वो औरत होता, so, man and woman, if you marry an American woman, she can live in India for as long as she wants. He has to go out every 6 months. So he had gone out, then COVID happened. Now, once COVID happened, people couldn't come back. But after some time, everybody who was man and woman married, everyone who had an OCI, Overseas Citizenship of India, they were allowed to come back. But he was not allowed because who is he? He's treated as a tourist. So he couldn't come back, and for 2 years he was outside the country, only communicating with his husband and his children just on Zoom and all that. Thank God Zoom is there. But he couldn't come back for 2 years. This is what happened. So these legal rights matter a lot. They can make a life and death difference. They are a life and death issue. Somebody falls ill, is in the hospital, you can't make any decisions, even if you have been married for a long time. Somebody dies, you can't make any decisions. You don't inherit anything, you don't get a visa. It's very, very difficult. Okay, so that's up to that point. I just want to tell you a few more things. So this is my second novel, published by Penguin. This is set in the 1920s. So what I wanted to see was, that Urdu poetry which I translated, which I gave you some examples, that was from the 1820s. Now in this 100 years, 1820s to 1920s, बहुत कायाकल्प हुआ. क्योंकि इस बीच में ब्रिटिश ने वो नया कानून लाया और attitudes in India changed completely. Something which earlier was not a huge problem became a huge problem. So in the second half of the 19th century, after 1857, after the 1857 revolt was defeated, then the Indian leadership, Hindu, Muslim, everyone, decided कि हमें तो अंग्रेजों की तरह बनना है, क्योंकि नहीं बनेंगे तो वो तो हमको defeat कर देना, हमें हरा दिया उन्होंने. So they changed all their attitudes. So everything which is not British, we must give it all up. So whether it is worshipping idols, images, murti puja, whether it is polygamy, whether it is courtesans, the riots, whether it is same-sex love, all this is bad because British don't do it. We must also stop all this. And they actually wrote about this in great detail. We have to be like the British. We have to be modern. And modern means we have to give up all this behavior of our sexual behavior. So what they did is all the earlier literature, like the kind of literature, the Urdu literature that I quoted to you, that they became ashamed of all that. उस सब को अश्लील बोलने लगे, उस सब को छुपा लिया. मुझे वो ये Urdu poetry ढूंढना पड़ा. I had to go to the library and copy it out by pencil. It was not available in print at all. Kama Sutra was available in translation without that chapter about men. वो chapter गायब कर दिया गया. So basically, Indians became ashamed of our own cultural heritage and literary heritage because started considering all of that obscene. ये वो सब अश्लील है, नहीं, हम तो हमेशा heterosexual थे, हमेशा monogamous थे, कभी polygamy तो था ही नहीं, and we were always the same as British. This is the new kind of thing that they began, Indian leadership began to say. So in 1920s, to give you an example, there was a Hindi writer, I don't know if you've heard of him, Pandey Bechan Sharma Ugre. Hindi pattern people Pandey Bechan Sharma Ugre. He was a nationalist, Gandhian, and he wrote a story called Chocolate. Chocolate was a slang word which men used to use about other men who they thought were very delicious or very nice. So they used to call them chocolate. So he wrote a story about this in 1924. And it created this huge furor in the Hindi world, huge uproar. कि ये कैसे लिख दिया, इस सब्जेक्ट पे तो कभी कुछ कहना ही नहीं चाहिए. तो उगले ने कहा कि मैं इसको क्रिटिसाइज करने के लिए, इसकी निंदा करने के लिए मैं छाप रहा हूँ. उन्होंने कहा नहीं, निंदा करने के लिए भी इस सब्जेक्ट पे कुछ एक भी शब्द नहीं लिखना चाहिए. So what I'm trying to say is that something which was always talked about and written about in India suddenly had become unspeakable. Not suddenly, but in the course of 50, 60 years, it had become unspeakable. From the 1820s to the 1920s, it had become unspeakable, and Ugra was told to not write about this. Now, Ugra, ऐसा आदमी चाहे उनको कहो मत करो तो वही करेगा. So he went and wrote 8 more stories, and he published the whole thing as a book called Chocolate, which I have translated. I've actually translated that book. Chocolate, he translated it, and he got so much criticism for it. And Hindi people will know this term घासलेट. घासलेटी साहित्य यानी अश्लील साहित्य. वो एक बनारसी दास चतुर्वेदी थे आलोचक. उन्होंने लिखा कि ये चॉकलेट नहीं है, ये घासलेट है. ये आप आग पे तेल डाल रहे हो, घासलेटी तेल डाल रहे हो, और ये बड़ी गलत बात है. तो इतना दुखी हुआ उग्र कि उन्हें लिखना ही छोड़ दिया और वो बॉम्बे चला गया और फिल्म स्क्रिप्ट्स लिखने लगा. So that's the story of Ugra. But so this novel is set in 1920s, and here I show. So in my first novel, I was showing these two girls in love in a society which did not make this love silent, where everybody knew about it and they were okay with it. But in 1920s, I show these two men who are in love with each other, who cannot talk about it. They feel ashamed, they feel embarrassed. So things have changed so much. That is what this novel discusses or explores. It shows modernity and the good things about modernity, but also the bad things about modernity. Okay, so come to how do the teachers and gurus view this whole situation? So some Hindu teachers have been opposing it, just say Baba Ramdev. So he said that this is unnatural, abnormal, etc. और इसको criminal नहीं करना चाहिए, इसको criminal decriminalize नहीं करना चाहिए. बाद में अब बदल गया है, ये अपनी राय बदल गई है, लेकिन उस वक्त यही कहा था. But Sri Ravi Shankar, he said that Hinduism में हमने हमेशा माना है कि हर एक व्यक्ति के masculine tendencies भी होती हैं, masculine प्रवृत्तियां होती हैं और feminine प्रवृत्तियां भी होती हैं. तो हमने कभी homosexuality को गलत नहीं समझा है. और he gave the example of Harihara Ayyappa, who has only 2 fathers, Vishnu and Shiva. He doesn't have any mother. So he gave the example of that, which I had also written about in Sensitisation. Okay, here's another example. You may have heard of, I don't know if you've heard of this very famous mathematician, Shakuntala Devi. Now, she wrote a little book, a very first book, very pioneering book in 1977. The book is called The World of Homosexuals. And for that book, she interviewed the head priest of the Vaishnav temple at Sri Rangam. It's a very, very important temple in South India. His name was Srinivas Raghavacharya. She interviewed him and asked him कि ये कैसे आपके homosexuality के बारे में आपकी क्या राय है? And he said कि the reason is this कि एक जन्म में आप दोनों बहुत attached है, किसी भी तरह से attached है, and in the next birth, one of you the sex is changed, but the attachment will still remain very strong, so they will have to seek out each other. So that was his explanation in 1977. So look at this, that in 1977 he said this, in 1987 that village woman said the same thing, in 2000 when I interviewed that Sheriff priest, he said the same thing. It's a very common explanation is my point. Yeah. Okay, so these are Ravi Shankar's tweets. There are male and female elements in every being, sometimes one is dominant and sometimes the other. Homosexuality has never been considered a crime in Hindu culture. In fact, Lord Ayyappa was born of Hari and Hara, Vishnu and Shiva. So my point is, the idea of same-sex unions and marriages is not imported from the West. It's an Indian idea. It appears from ancient times, medieval times, modern times, in many Indian languages, right? So what is the import from the West? What is imported from the West is the modern homophobia. The fear of same-sex sexuality, that fear, that phobia, That is imported from the West. और अब young पे देखिए, विडम्बना देखिए कि West पे सब accept हो गया है और हम जो है हम उल्टा 360 degrees change. This is how societies change. Then in India we always accepted it, or we didn't have a huge problem with it, and now we have changed completely. Whereas in the West they have a huge problem with it, and they have changed the other way. So societies keep changing exactly in these interesting ways, which you can't predict. Okay, I just want to end with some images of present day marriages, and so you can take a photo if you like. And I found this particular wedding of these two young South Indian men, one is Tamil, one Malayalam. Very moving. They both do the Sakshan Pranam to both their parents, and it's a totally conventional Hindu South Indian wedding of these two young men. And the other one, they were married in Kolkata, these two Bengali men. So, okay, I want to just end on this note that even though we don't have a legal right to marry in India, Thailand has the right now. In Thailand now, same-sex marriages are legal. In India, we don't have the rights. But still, I think we have a lot to be grateful for. We should be grateful that we are in a society where these wedding ceremonies can take place and are taking place openly and publicly, and all the courts have said this. Courts have been saying it for 25 years, Indian courts. कि चाहे लीगल राइट्स ना हो लेकिन आपको जो सेरेमनी करना है आपने शादी करनी है हिंदू सेरेमनी से वो कर सकते हैं आप कैन डू एनीथिंग एज एडल्ट्स यू कैन डू इट टुगेदर सो दैट्स नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम but there are still, as we know, many countries in the world where you can be legally executed just for being homosexual. Forget about marriage. Marriage is even if you are just homosexual, you can be executed. So we should be thankful we live in a democracy where we can make these choices for ourselves. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Students, if you want to ask something from ma'am, the floor is all open. If you want to share any experiences or if you want to ask something.
ये लगा देना मैम नहीं यही है but his sister
Good afternoon, ma'am. I take a such engaging talk. My question is, I am Rani from the Department of English Change. My question is related to that Qatar is starting a regulation. There are many instances of same-sex relationships in Qatar Islamic and also such takes to but not just between humans. It's also there's a story to the wife. The husband is actually upset because the wife is associated with the yoga, and he clearly tells her that don't associate with the yoga. But there's a different one. In Qatar Islamic, when the selective beings are sent, then when their relationship with men, it's more turmoil, it's in a turmoil. But when their relationship with women, like with their wives or the yoga Egyptians, they have relations with women. It is more pure and more friendly in a way. And it's not something in that area.
Yes, in one of the episodes, stories, I've been told that these two girls, and one of the girls is Vidyadhari. She becomes a Vidyadhar. But she doesn't matter a whole lot. She behaves like a woman. Whereas the example I gave of two men from the conception, they are actually men. It's a very interesting story. One is a Daku and one is a Banya's son. The Banya's son is going on a trading expedition and the Daku stops him and is going to sacrifice him to Kali. But the minute he sees him, he falls in love with him, so he says, मुझे sacrifice कर दो उसकी जगह, जान बचा लेता है. और फिर वो जाके उसके साथ रहता है. He goes to the town. He's a chieftain living in the forest. He goes to the town, lives with him, and then the merchant's son gets married to a woman. So all three are living together. And at the end of life, the merchant's son remembers his former birth and decides to jump off a rock. So he jumps off the rock to kill himself. His wife also jumps off. And then his friend also jumps off. So we know about a wife killing herself with a husband. What we haven't explored sufficiently, and at some point I'll write about this. There are many examples of a man also killing himself when his male best friend, or whatever you want to call him, his Saka, kills himself. The man also kills himself. So a suicide crime, this kind of dying for love is there. And you see it in Hindi cinema, you see it in popular cinema also. Yeah.
Also, there's a story where, if I can recall the number, not exactly the number, but there's a story where a king's son falls in, like there's a commoner falls in love with a princess.
Yes.
The princess lives inside a castle, and he decides as a woman to free the princess. And the princess is, and the man decides as a woman, and then the prince falls in love with that prostitute maid, and they also get married. That whole ritual is performed there. So there are many other instances in letters that have started where we see these relationships popping up, but gladly you mentioned them.
Yeah, lots of very complicated things happen in Saga. I also wrote about cross-caste and cross-class marriages that take place. I wrote about man and woman, but one is a princess, one is a thief, one is a so-called what was called in Samara, very supposedly low caste, and one is a princess. They fall in love, but then because of rebirth, so he's going to commit suicide and she's going to commit suicide. But the parents have a dream. Parents don't want the children to die, no? So they have a dream that in the previous life they were married. So they said, nah, they were husband and wife in the previous life, so we can get them married now. Then all the Brahmins in the city say that we are all going on Anshan and going to kill ourselves. So they all sit down and have this right. But then they also have a dream that yes, these people married in the previous birth, so okay. So then they get married. So what I'm saying is that rebirth becomes the explanation or the way in which you can legitimize all kinds of disapproved relationships. It's very interesting.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is from the novel where you discussed the writers writing about female love, the Chakti Nama. So, if the writers were writing about it and it started as a genre, what does this reflect about the social acceptation of accepting this female love? What was the norm then? Did the society accept it or not?
So that was my whole point. That was why I studied that society, because clearly, if these writers could write about it so openly, these famous writers in Charabin and so on, and included it in their collective works, today they wouldn't be able to do that, I don't think. So explicit, writing so explicitly about it. Serious poetry. They were including it, and they were reading this poetry in court, in front of the king and all the nobles and everybody's, the Nawab. So they were not having any problems doing all this. So clearly, it was acceptable. Then they also wrote about it and said, who are these women? A very interesting way in the society, they used to make a difference between Tawaif and Sharif. Sharif होते और Tawaif होते अलग अलग होती थी. लेकिन ये जो शायर हैं रंगीन कवि हैं, उन्होंने लिखा कि Tawaif और Sharif ठीक है, लेकिन actually उनकी जिंदगियों में इतना फर्क नहीं है. So these kinds of relationships were there both among the Tawaif and the Sharif, and then also the poetry is not only about this. The poetry is about the lives of women. Everyday lives of women. क्यों पिकनिक पे जा रही हैं, बाहर जा रही हैं, शॉपिंग कर रही हैं, फैब्रिक खरीद रही हैं, ज्वेलरी खरीद रही हैं, कॉस्मेटिक्स खरीद रही हैं, सब कुछ डिस्क्रिप्शन, डिटेल डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ ऑल दोस थिंग्स. हम जब सोचते हैं गजल के बारे में तो हम सोचते हैं कोई मर रहा है और अपनी बिलावट के लिए मर रहा है. This is the kind of poetry we are used to जो हिंदी मूवीज में दिखाते हैं गजल में. But I wrote about this poetry which I call non-mystical ghazal. It is not about mysticism and dying for a beloved and dying for the beloved who stands for God. No. It's about everyday life. It's about going shopping, lots about fabrics and jewelry and picnics and going to the dargah, frying pakoras there, in front of there, making a fire, and then quarreling with your servants, quarreling with your neighbors, having love affairs, having friendship. Everyday life. And these women could be Tawaif or Sharif. It's not clear from the poetry. So they're writing about the lives of women. It's a very unique moment in Lucknow where this happens. This doesn't happen normally in Urdu poetry. It's just about 50, 70 years that this happens. Remarkable. Yeah, right.
So, ma'am, you just now said that we do not write it so explicitly now. So, do you think will we, in the coming future, is there going to be writing again about this point? Will we ever reach that
It
point?
depends on the language. See, I said they don't write Urdu. In Urdu, it is not written about so explicitly now. And yes, it could change again, and things keep changing. We think that we are always progressing, and this is absolutely wrong, that things always get better and better. No. If you read the Greek poet Sappho, 7th century BC, she was writing so openly about love between women without any protest. It was not protest poetry, it was just simple love poetry. It never occurs to her that there is any problem. Now, no longer can we ever write like that. That era is gone. So these poets in the 18th century, I was interested before the British, just before 1857, right? So there's still independent Indian cultures, Indian literary cultures, in which they can write like this. Now they can't write like this, right? But in English, now it is being written. In India also in English, very openly and explicitly it's being written. It depends on the language. So किसी भाषा में लिखा जरा वो बदलता रहता है. So societies keep changing.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Priyanka. I have two questions for you. I want to know what are the challenges that you faced when you were researching about same-sex relationships, and also same-sex relationships are a natural phenomenon. But why do human society view it with such condemnation?
But I'm not going to say they don't. They don't. Human societies don't. Some societies do, some societies don't. Ancient Greek society clearly didn't. Clearly they wrote poetry, they made art, everything, where they were celebrating male love particularly, but also female love. Sappho wrote about female love. The Greeks, ancient Greeks considered her the greatest lyric poet, not greatest woman poet, greatest lyric poet. Okay. So I was interested in how did Indian society before the British view things. Clearly, Indian society didn't have this huge problem, condemnatory problem, the way in the West. And in the West, they have this problem because the Bible explicitly says that it is wrong. That's why. Hindu scriptures don't say that explicitly in that way. So that's one reason, not the only reason, but that is one reason. Okay, but even in the Muslim courts in India, and every religion is different in different countries. It's not exactly the same. So at least it wasn't. Now it may be becoming more similar to global communication. So Indian Islam was somewhat different in this respect. For instance, at all the Muslim courts, most of the Muslim courts, they are openly having male-male relationships, not just in literature, in life. There's plenty of documentation of this. The only person who made some attempt to stop it was, interestingly, the king we consider the most liberal, which is Akbar. He actually put out a farman saying that ye nahi karna chahiye to his noblemen. Don't do it, please don't do this. But everybody just ignored him and continued doing what they were doing. And he also knew that he can't stop it, so he didn't make any attempt to stop it. So this is very interesting. Despite the Quranic prohibition on it, there was not. So, people don't always listen to what is in the scriptures necessarily. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So it's not true that it's condemned everywhere at all times. Up West में देख लो, Christian West में majority अभी भी Christian है, but they are fine with it. They make marriage legal, everything legal. So it changes. Societies all keep changing all the time. As far as my research goes and my problem challenges, I was telling another group in the morning, I think the biggest challenge was finding the materials for the first book, Same-Sex Love and India, because we both were editing the book. We didn't know all the languages of India, right? We only knew some languages. So we didn't know the South Indian languages at all. So we had to ask people for that. And किसी से भी पूछो तो कहते थे नहीं हमारी भाषा में कुछ भी नहीं लिखा है. There's nothing there. So we asked. I was telling them this funny incident where I was asking a Kannada writer, famous Kannada writer, Sahitya Kandi, in his office, is there anything in Kannada? And he said, nahi, kuch nahi hai. Then his assistant standing behind said, but sir, you wrote a play in which this topic is there. You can submit it. Then he said, ha. So what my point is that when you are asked this question, you don't think of it, you don't notice it, and you say it nahi hai. But actually है, हर literature में है, सिर्फ आपको याद नहीं है कि कहाँ है. So that was the problem, to find the literature. And when I found it, it was also had been declared obscene and locked up in the libraries. So when I was doing the Urdu poetry, I went to the Rasa Rampur library in Rampur in UP, and I had to copy out the manuscripts by hand. They were not allowing photocopy. It's copying out by pencil. And it was difficult because they were very wondering, like, why am I doing this? Why am I copying out these old manuscripts? And he came and was trying to read what I'm writing, and I didn't want him to read because he read it and get shocked. So I didn't want him to read it. This man who was there in the library, fortunately, he couldn't understand it because 19th century Urdu script is different. The writing is different from what it is now. So, nahi samajh mein aaya. So finding those things, yeah, इस latest book में आशा सहाय वाला 1947 वाला उपन्यास जो है, मुझे मालूम था कि ये है उपन्यास, लेकिन मिला नहीं मुझे कहीं भी, और बहुत ढूंढा, बहुत हिंदी वालों से पूछा, साहित्यकारों से, किसी को नहीं मालूम था. Finally, I found it online in some US library. So finding the materials was the difficulty. Yeah.
One last question. So I recently watched a movie called as Past. In that movie, there's a scene in which Lajju is getting beaten by her husband because she is unable to produce a child. So, in one instance, she is having one very emotional bond, and they both are sharing, Lajju and Rani are sharing, and they're touching each other in that aspect. So when I saw that, and in that there is a dialogue that अगर हम एक दूसरे की कमी पूरी कर देते हैं, हमें मर्दों की कुछ जरूरत नहीं है. So there's this. I was reading my paper. It was written that there's this eco anxiety, which we call as that future generations. We are having this problem that sometimes women might not need men for this. Apart from having this reproductive thing, we don't need men as such. It was written there, and this is what we call as eco anxiety. So,
Where did you come up with this funny term?
yeah. So, ma'am, so my question is that is it really a problem?
इनका कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है क्लियरली, हमें कोई बच्चों की कमी नहीं है. That's the last problem. किसी समाज में हो सकता है, ये मतलब नहीं है. And दूसरी बात, when you need woman who needs man is not only for the sake of producing children. Maybe attracted to a man also, because you need a man because you want to live with a man. It's बच्चों के लिए थोड़ी.
But in that way, they all are facing a lot of troubles because they are competing so they are comforting each other and providing a solution that apart from having these progeny, we don't need them as such.
Yeah, but the point is, whom are you attracted to? If you only want to live with another woman because the man is harassing you, but the wrong man, you go and get. But if you are really attracted to being with a woman, should be because you are attracted to the woman and you love the woman, not just say, "ये आदमी मुझे मारना चलो." अब movies में movies are वास्तविकता में बहुत फर्क है.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for delivering an insightful and intellectually rigorous inaugural address and also satisfying the quest of our students. Your talk did not stay at the level of slogans or sentiments. It grounded the discussion in literary history, textual evidence, and social context. By tracing same-sex relationships in Indian literature and history, you challenge the lazy assumptions that such identities are recent imports and instead demonstrated their deep cultural presence. The clarity with which you connected scholarship to contemporary social realities made the session meaningful for both students and faculty. You pushed audience to think, not just to agree, to question inherited prejudices, to read more carefully, and to approach gender with seriousness rather than superficial opinion. Your address set a strong academic tone for the course and established exactly with easy answers. We sincerely appreciate the time, depth of preparation, and intellectual honesty you brought to this session, ma'am. So thank you so much, ma'am. We are truly honored to have you. Okay, so there is a small announcement that to my left side and in front of you, you can see a book exhibition is put up for you all. This book, these are the books by Honorable Speaker Professor Ruth ma'am. So once our session gets over, you can come forward, you can see those books, and you can also buy those books on a very good discounted prices. So do check them out once our session is over. Gratitude is not a formality in academic gatherings. It is an acknowledgement that knowledge is always collective. To propose the vote of thanks, I would like to invite Dr. Tuba Masood Ma'am, Department of English, and also member of the Spectrum Club, Vasanta College for Women.
Thank you, Dr. Akansha, for inviting me for the formal vote of thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Department of English and the Spectrum Club, Vasanta College for Women, it is my privilege to extend the deepest sense of gratitude to, first and foremost, Professor Ruth Vanita for delivering the inaugural address for the 30 hours add-on course on gender sensitization. Ma'am, thank you ever so much for honoring us with the effort to visit all the way here. Your pioneering life and career as a trailblazing scholar and activist for same-sex love and inclusivity is a true testament to the themes you explored today. As an openly lesbian scholar and advocate for same-sex love, you embody the very ideas of gender and sensitization that you have illuminated today. Your work and your words today have stirred our minds and souls. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it, but thank you, ma'am. To our esteemed principal, Professor Alka Singh, thank you for your ever-present support and for championing this hybrid add-on course. My gratitude also to the entirety of the Department of English, Professor Manjari Chitulwala, Professor Saurabh Kumar Singh, Dr. Sunita Arya, Dr. Rachna Pandey, and Dr. Vishal Singh. Heartfelt gratitude to each and every member of the Spectrum Club for their tireless efforts in bringing this inaugural session and this add-on course to fruition. A word of gratitude to all the other teachers whose presence has added more value to this gathering and deliberation. And of course, a very special word of gratitude and heartfelt appreciation for our dear students for their active listening, engagement, and discussion with Professor Vanita. Your energy and active participation truly enriched this session and made it so much more meaningful. Thank you once again. I would like to request everyone, including our esteemed guests, to assemble for a group photograph.